Hi there, my name is Vivian and I'm from ANU Academic Skills. In this video, I'm going to be talking about structuring a report for engineering and computer science courses. So when you are in the process of writing a report, it's really useful to think about how your key message determines the structure of your report. So to have a really logical structure, you need to have your key message in mind. And this is why when you're writing a group report, it's really useful to meet first of all with your group and work out what your key message is going to be before you start doing any division of the work, or before you start working out what your structure is going to be. So always have your key message in mind when you're thinking about the structure of your report. Now, basically a report might follow this generic kind of structure where you have your title page, your front matter like your table of contents, you may have an executive summary, then the key parts of the report are where you have an introduction, a discussion, which is making up the main body of the report, a conclusion, recommendations, followed by references and appendices. Now, the discussion section is going to be one of the hardest parts to write because it's really up to you as to how you structure it. And some lecturers will give you very detailed instructions as to how they want you to structure the discussion if they've got a very prescribed set of instructions to follow. But other lecturers will leave it up to you. And then your task is to work out what structure will suit your key message. Another way to think about it is that it is kind of similar to a science report where you might have a section about introductions, a section about methods, results and discussions. And really the key thing to think about is what are the purposes of these sections, because you might be mixing these parts together, but it's useful to think about the purposes of them. So an introduction is, why did you investigate this particular problem? The methods is talking about how did you investigate it? The results is talking about what did you find, and then the discussion is talking about why is it meaningful. But in a KEX report, you might be mixing together the method, results, and discussion sections all together, depending on how you want to plan it. So thinking about a typical report structure for KEX, we usually have something like this, where you have an executive summary, an introduction, then an analysis of the problem and the specifications or the requirements, then an analysis of the design ideas and the decisions that you made, followed by the proposal that you're coming up with in terms of your particular design, and the recommendations about why you think this design will be successful, and if you've implemented it, what recommendations do you have for future work, followed by a very brief conclusion and references. So thinking about how you organize the body of the report, first of all, identify what your major points are going to be, because that will form your sections and your subsections. Then within each subsection or main section, think about what are the individual points going to be, because those will turn into your paragraphs. And if you have those multiple subsections within a main part of the report, you might need to also include brief introductions just to explain what's the purpose of that particular section, as well as brief conclusions to summarize what did that section show and how does it link on to the next section. So let's have a look at an example structure. So this is from a computer science report. So first of all, the student has an abstract, which is similar to an executive summary, followed by an introduction, and then they have a section called preliminaries. And this can be about the math or about the theories that you use. Then they have this section called discussion on consensus protocol. And it's divided up into applications, coefficient setting methods, proposal of the coefficient setting method for their particular consensus, the 2-hop consensus, and then the adaptive coefficient setting method, so the evolution of their method, and then their updates to the scheme. So in here, in that discussion on consensus protocol section, they're really talking about what did they do, what are their methods, and what did they find along the way. Then they have their simulation results, which are talking about, well, when they've done the simulation, how did it run? Was it successful or not? And the discussion follows that on by talking about the effect of the graph topology. So based on their simulation results and based on their consensus protocol, what were the effects? So the graph topology and the effect of the consensus protocol. So that discussion is the main part where they're talking about, well, why are their findings meaningful? Followed by their conclusion and their references. So in a similar way, in an engineering report structure is talking about what did they do, why did they do it, what did they find, and why is that meaningful? So first of all, we have the introduction and then the theoretical background. So setting up the preliminaries again, talking about what do we need to know, what is the background to this material that, that they are going to be working on. Then they've developed a hypothesis. So they're testing the hypothesis within this report, and they have their methods sections. So talking about the equipment, everything that they used, what they actually did, what the steps were. And then they have a section about the results and the analysis. And in those sections, they're talking about what were their findings and what did they find in relation to dome properties, density of the composite, longitudinal modulus, and transverse modulus of elasticity. So those are talking about what are their findings. They're describing the findings. And notice how they've organized it in a way that's easy to follow using those subheadings. Then they've got the discussion, where they're talking about overall why their findings meaningful. Now they do talk about the limitations, and then they back it up by talking about the comparison of the dome making in the lab and the industrial scale. So looking ahead to the future. So their discussion involves that overall analysis of why are their results meaningful and how does it relate to future work, and was it successful or unsuccessful, going back to that key message, followed by a brief conclusion and then their references. So really think about how your report structure can support your key message. So there has to be a very logical sequence of ideas, and that narrative that flows all the way through the report should really make it clear to your reader what your key message is, and make it clear that your proposed recommendation or your design or the key message that you have is logical, that it is effective. So therefore, every paragraph and every part of the report has a purpose that relates back to that key message. So think very carefully about how you structure it. And in the next video, we're going to be talking about paragraphing to help you present your key message within paragraphs.